we are going to start with Mr. Hector Aguilar Camin.
Thank you very much. I hope that the future of Molina Enriquez is not ours. We can have in this book something about the influence which with the Molino Enriquez extraordinary book has had. Although I'm afraid that this book is heading in a very different direction. Molina Enriquez's book, although we are trying to think here about a future, a modern Mexican future, a future of a country which can be present in the history of others in the lapse of one generation, cease being an emerging country, cease being a subdeveloped country, underdeveloped country, and increase per capita income from $8 to $9 million today, and become in the lapse of a generation, in the lapse of 15 or 20 years, a developed country, a middle class country, a country of a per capita above $20,000 per person. This is the proposal that's included in this essay. This essay is not an essay. It's not an innocent essay. It is not born from an occurrence, an intellectual that we have had, that Jorge and I have had. It is born in reality from a certain desperation of having lived during too many years in Mexico in a public atmosphere, lacking clarity in political forces, in the means of communication, academic and intellectual environments, in the business community, a lack of clarity about what is the future, the desirable future for Mexico. It arises from a desperation in the public environment context in which the country suffers, having lost the course and having lost the ambition of being a great country, and of having lost, in general, the agreement about some issues, fundamental issues, which would allow it to become again the great country that it was meant to be. And this perception, which is highlighted in our, or perhaps it's an ambitious attempt to imagine with all clarity the future, which we think is desirable for Mexico, and to try not only to make it as a piece, as an intellectual piece, but rather to make it, to a certain extent, as a manifest, as a proposal of which diffusion and promotion will be in charge of, with the point to place this proposal in the realm of discussion in the history of Mexico, in the succession of presidential for the year 2010. We would like to place this agenda in the public realm as a reference, not the only one, but as a reference, in light of which the different political actors have to define themselves with clarity. That's our intention, with which we do here in this book. Surely each one of the proposals here are linked to who have developed the book very well. Our proposals barely pronounced. They need a lot of formulation, preciseness to really transform themselves into action. But they're proposals that have an internal connection, unity, not just a list of good wishes or good proposals among themselves. If they don't have coherence, which we believe is the principal purpose, the most interesting intellectual purpose of this essay, Mexico lost in the economic crises of the 70s and 80s. The starting point, the great sheet of music that gave it definition and sense to the public life in a very false manner, which is the heart of the Mexican Revolution. The president of the last few decades of the crisis said he will be the last president of the Mexican Revolution, Cedillo. Effectively, his government reached its end. There was a moment in which, in the institution of Mexican, characterized by many things that are still there, but which don't have credibility or force. For example, there's a strong intervention of the state, very general, hegemonic in the public life, the PRI, and a president, owner of this party in the drive of the political campaign. And with this, all the revolutionary myths of the state company as a representative of the generational interests, the state driver, fundamental of the society's strengths and forces, which would defend the democracy and social justice as the objectives of the post-revolutionary regimen. It ended this experience in the crisis of November 94 and 82. And there was another one that started, which effectively the substitution of all this system for an economy which was more open, more liberalized. It's less state, which the greatest and piece has the largest consequences, which is the free trade agreement with the NAFTA. Since then, in the structure, as a big enemy to Mexico and the threat through this NAFTA, it has transformed itself into a big opportunity for Mexico. And this proposal of modernization had a lot of strength in public and gave sense to its course. And it was key for Mexico to be a first world country, not a third world one. This proposal ended up in a big crisis in 94-95, very similar to the crisis to 76 and 80. It also ended the credibility of the proposal of modernization in Mexico made in the 90s. The country remained with the only course desirable in the future, with the process of democratic transition. The democracy became the director of all the public forces. And towards that, they walked the different actors of the political realm with effectiveness until it was consumed in 2000. The first in the power, democratic power, and Pacific in the history of Mexico. And as of this achievement, historic achievement in the democratic conquest, this land begins, this democratic land is mythic in the sense of forces which remain in the public space, and they can impose, they can drive, they can establish an idea for the future, complex, attractive, and achievable by the government, democratic governments of Mexico, starting in 2000. And this disenchantment of democracy begins with the lack of results in democracy, for the continuous tie among the political forces, the disability to reach agreements or not to reach consensus, not mainly supported by the political system of the country. And in this tie, where 10 years later, the country returns to be, as I said at the beginning of this essay, without discourse, without clarity, resigned to whatever is possible to do in an economy, in a society, and a political system that requires changes unreachable. And it are these changes that we propose in this book. Jorge Castaneda is going to summarize them and speak in more detail of them, but fundamentally it will refer to 4 strategic decisions. First, to assume the changes in the economy, which requires to grow. The second is very important, is to decide the place which Mexico seeks to be placed in the world. The third is universalize the rights and social justice to build an effective economy and country where at least more than 2/3 of the society will live more or less in a middle-class situation of a developed country. And the fourth is to make the democracy productive through reforms, institutional reforms, which guarantee the citizens' safety and security. Those are the 4 proposals summarized in this book that Jorge now will summarize. Thank you very much.
Now Jorge Castaneda will have the word. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you very much to all of you for being here. Thank you, John, for inviting us. Thank you, Tom Trevitt, Director of Colombia, here for us of the hospitality and the support for this event. Very quickly, I'm not going to touch the social proposal, the minimum protection for all Mexicans, because the author will introduce that proposal. And also, if you want to criticize him, you can criticize him. I am not going to also talk about the fiscal side, because Jesus Hector will talk about it. The first thing that Hector and I talked in the essay was the obstacle that our opinion is the principle is the impossibility of the growth of the Mexican economy. There are several excuses why that is done. Everything is done because of the productivity, the work in Mexico, the production in Mexico. It happens also because of more saving in Mexico. But all that, in our opinion, has everything to do with the great difficulty that exists in the country to deconcentrate the power that the factic power has. As long as Mexico has a factic power at the degree that it is, all these other steps, which are fundamental, are not going to be impossible or very difficult. Factic powers like monopolies or oligopolies or companies that they dominate or only unions have been and the democracy have had a great concentration of power in the power. The monopoly of Pemex, don't look at Jesus, it's not his fault. Public monopoly of the SFE, syndicated union monopolies, that it's in the education side of the country. Monopolies in which is concentrated with the TVs, monopolies of the different political parties, which is very impossible to be independent in the Mexico City and federal and state side. And now where the rage has lightened up because of the Mexican power, it's not because this is due to the president power that has given the rage against these different politicians. As long as we do not deconcentrate the power of these factive powers in the syndicated side, in the financial, in the economic, in the commercial, in the TV, in the media, and in the intellectual, until this doesn't happen, it will be impossible for the economy to grow at the levels that it's supposed to grow. This is not an only condition, but it's a necessary condition. The second proposal that we wrote in this text has everything to do with the text. Hector already mentioned it. It is that to be able to burst the creativity and the outburst of it, we need to make sure that the savings that the economic side are over there, and also we need to bring know-how from outside of the country. And to be able to do that from outside the country, we need to define what it means outside of the country, which is a big problem for us, because we have more than 100 years that we have decided in those facts, which means United States. But it has not until today that we have decided that United States is the one who's going to help us. So now we are in the middle of this kind of like craziness that 80 or 90% of our commerce, that our investments and tourism, technology, and without even mentioning migration, everything came from the United States. But when we don't want to assume the consequences of this fact, especially today, 1 out of 9 Mexicans born in Mexican land lives in United States. That is 1 out of 9. It's one of the highest number in the world. Ecuador and El Salvador are also high out there. The option for Mexico, it's not South American, but it's an integration with commerce zone with the United States, with Canada. We say it very clearly without any sugarcoating to make sure that we are able to provoke the discussion, which means have the cake and eat it too. The second one is to be able to divide the wealth in a better way. But I'm not going to talk about this, but Santiago will be talking about this. Same with Jesus, he will be talking about the fiscal side. Given the resources that Mexico has a minimum floor for the resources, and be able to have the support to be able to achieve that. But the last one, it's the institutional reform that the country needs, the political reforms, they even say that it's the state reform, that there are like 4 or 5 different subjects that they are starting to be out there in the public discussions, as if President Calderon from mid-December had given 10 or 15 different reforms of this type. We would like to think that Mr. Calderon inspired in his text, but we don't have any type of illusions that that is the case. We are very humble, the two of us, so we would never have that thought in our head. But what it is true is that Mr. Calderon and his team took notice of the same inquietudes that we had, that 1997, since PRI lost their majority in the chamber of in the lower chamber, and in 2003 when they lost the presidency, and they also lost the majority in the Senate, the last regime, all those old institutions, they do not work, and they have the country in a standstill situation. In 1996 has created some type of equilibrium between the three different parties, equal elections, clean, very fair, but did not create any mechanisms to create any majority in the chambers. And since 1997, there has been none. Therefore, there have been no reforms. Jesus Reyes-Heroles had the fortune to have lived very closely the failure of the energetic proposal of Mr. Cirillo. The failure of this failure was due to the ban, which in 1998 was some part of it in energy, and that he had the responsibility, that he had the reform that was very important, however, not enough. But now, with being president of Pemex, now due to the PRI, now the country is in a standstill situation because it doesn't have any institutions that allow them to make any decisions. What we say in this text, Hector and myself, they are reforms that they're very simple, not very. We are not reinventing the wheel. The second election, the second round for the presidency election, 50%, at least presidents must have at least 50% of the votes. Senators and deputies being held accountable. The legislative team be the referendum to change the Constitution, that the Constitution will be able to be changed. Right now in Mexico, it is impossible to change the Constitution. Now, for example, it's only able to change the Constitution only when it comes to the media. Calderon, somebody from the media says that Calderon has been able to change the Constitution the most of all the presidents. But right now in the Constitution, you have to put that hopefully will run more next year than this year. But there has been no important changes in the Constitution because with the regime of three political groups, with a change of 2/3, means that one of them has be able to has a veto power. The competence of the arena, so the president has more power and has more influence over the Congress, and also only we kind of like we make a hint, although we say it, but without too many details. It is very important to have majority in the chambers. Majorities, it doesn't matter which ones, in preference, the preference of the president. So the president can govern at least the first half of this period, but at least half of the opposition. But at least there has to be some majority in the chambers. Mexico needs a very presidential power where it has at least some majority in the Congress. Maybe this is the most important subject that has to come first in the sequence, because if not, the other reforms that now Santiago and Jesus will be talking about will not be able to be done. And this one must be the most debatable one. Now that we have seen the discussion that it's going on in the country, we have seen how effectively that old conservative group It's not limited only to the politics in the group, but it starts in all the different areas. In Mexico, we don't like to change. Why we would change, but why we would change them? We don't like to change, because the worst thing we can do is to change without having the certainty of where we are going. But we do think that we know we were going, and we think that these proposals are going to allow to make decisions. That's why we are here with Hector and Santiago and Jesus to discuss them with you. And we are going to continue to do it all over the Mexican country and as well here in the United States. Thank you, John and Tom.
Ahora voy a give the floor to Jesus Reyes-Heroles. Thank you very much, John. It's a pleasure to be here in this academic institution sharing debates about such an important topic. And so it's a pleasure to meet with you again. I'm going to make 4 commentaries about really the opportunity and the purpose of the proposal of Castaneda, a second about the characteristics of his proposal and the pertinency of the corresponding proposal, and the third is about the coincidence between what Calderón proposed, and the content of the proposal, especially its importance. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the 3 keys for the future of Mexico, trying to wrap it up, putting in order, in my perspective, the proposals and elements that we have. Obviously, and as proposed in the book, the idea is to mobilize the society and to have a discussion, intelligent discussion, systematic about the corresponding elements and motivate the general incidents for it to happen. A second, and this is a proposal obviously shared, and it's to make sure that the next election is more based on platforms and proposals, detailed platforms, than in the past, which can allow elements for programs for the future of Mexico. This is really an opportunity because it's the time in our country for this moment, and it's also based on Calderón's administration, and all the political forces of the country are becoming aligned for the next electoral situation in 2012. Also, due to the form as seen with the second part of Calderón, the fact is that in both proposals there's the discussion about Mexico, which has been detained, has gotten smaller due to the lack of a deep reform. Regarding the proposal, I'm not going to repeat what I believe is that the elements, there are 2 levels. The 4 proposals on the 21 of the book are really long chapters, and then the specific proposal with more development in the text. I think these proposals can be summarized, but it's not very relevant, the fact that these elements are there. It's the point to start for this discussion, and I'm mentioning some of the chapters. Obviously, it's not the most important topic. The past, which weighs us down, to build a middle class, which has proposals inserted about reorientation. The national goal, less towards political about poverty, but politics towards growth. It's a reflection about the situation in Mexico. It's implicit. It's not explicit, but that's the topic. It's a little contradictory that this change of emphasis is accompanied in other chapters regarding the size society and the theme distribution of poverty. But I think it's an important topic about the construction and monopolies, and then the relationship between the state and the unions. And then a chapter about the democracy, which has how to make democracy does not prevent a more efficient government, and 3 reforms proposed to produce how to produce majorities, how to provide power to voters, and how to achieve that the executive have more capacity to of initiative, a less suppressed executive like we have now. In this respect, the truth is there's a coincidence, and there's a coincidence between the proposals of with Mexico with a future and of the President Calderon. There's a little bit of change in the expression, especially with the fighting poverty. Calderon talks about protecting the society, and the coverage, universal coverage, is to adopt the proposal of Santiago Levy in commenting and a quality-oriented education, and consequently I think that one of the first question is, why is this coincidence here? It's because in reality, did you see the agenda of the public policy debates? The country has sometimes the country debates a long time now. This is the first observation that I wanted to make. But the second one is that the fact that there is this coincidence, I think, facilitates the following debate. Now, we don't have to be looking in the chapters, just a few adjustments in the headings and of the topics, but we can move through them very quickly and to pass to the next stage, which is the discussion of the contents in more detail. And about this, I would like to only speak about 3 points, and one in particular. As the proposal, what it lacks is a sense of hierarchy and priority. I think that the stage coming in this public debate, in this public discussion, and as the proposal for a future of Mexico, requires that we do not spread out and thin the forces. After three or four, focus on 3 or 4 things so it's more reachable, viable. And let's not get lost in details. I think that the proposal, there are really 3 proposals, and I'm going to say them because I'm not going to concentrate on them. One proposal has to do with the topic of overcome the fiscal precarity. For me, it's like the mother. It's not the mother of all proposals, but it's important for democracy, for the government to become more efficient. There's also a third that's not in the document, but I'm just simply putting it on the table so we can talk about it at the time of question and answer, is to search for a social policy which is based on the right of election among the citizens. I have many things that the Mexican state has been deciding for the citizens for many decades, many decades. And the truth, the following step has to be based on the exercise of affecting, after we can comment a little bit more about that, but really about the fiscal precarity, which is absolutely critical, because although all the other reforms took place, if there is no how do we understand fiscal precarity? The insufficiency of these public sector or institutions in the investment and the public sector, which corresponds or is generated from a chronic degeneration of the public sector revenue, in particular for the fiscal and tributary revenue. I think the numbers are absolutely appropriate, and it's worth it to talk about two or three. In 2008, the last year, we have the most recent statistics. The public cost of the government, the total government expense, OCD, implies federal, state, municipal, plus Social Security, was equivalent to 23.7% of the PBI. And then it's 40. When many of the countries of Latin America had coefficients of total expenses higher than 23.7, including the Social Security. We're talking about a stretch of about 18%. Obviously, a government of 23 and another government of 40 or a public sector are totally different. We're talking about two different animals, totally different, and that's the center of the debate. How should we tax? And that's part of the country. What kind of country do we want to be in the future? It's not an economic problem. It's the main economic problem of Mexico, because if we don't deal with it, we don't resolve the other ones. The truth is that the public investment, for example, has fallen in Mexico during the last few years very strongly, from 6.7 of the PBI between 80 when Mexico was growing to 4.3% between 2000 and 2009. And there's very clear statistics and evidence that in order for Mexican to grow, the percent has to be higher than 23%. And we haven't seen it in a while, this investment in a long time higher than this percentage. And of course, the conception is that the investment in the public and the private are complementary. And it's a paradigm. The economy can grow if there's public investment. That's not the case. There are certain investments that can. There are others that can't. And this is what we have to resolve. In order to simply indicate the income, I'm going to talk about that. In 2006, the last available statistics compared the income, total income of Mexico was equivalent to 20.6% of the PBI. The federal organized states was 34.2%. There's a gap of 13.6% of total fiscal income between Mexico and other countries. But the composition is a composition. And so they indicate where are the areas of opportunity which have to do with the country that we want to achieve. And we can't imagine a country without a financial structure. And who has to generate the income? I'm going to pass through numerous. The federal government in Mexico, 11.9. In the OECD, 14.8. The states, 3%. 6 municipals, 0.9% of the GDP. It doesn't exist. In OECD, 2.8. And Social Security is a topic that Santiago knows very well for his academic work. 3.2% in Mexico, 9.9% in the average of the OECD. You can't imagine what this number means for the future of the system of pension.
What type of country do we want to be? Also, we want to know what type of pension system that we want the country to have. So please, I just want to make sure that this is on the table. The truth of the matter is the integration of the income has to be consistent with the type of country that we have, and that has to do with how things are divided, what goes to social security, to the municipals, to the states. This is the state cannot tell what the municipals can do, and that cannot be the case. This is one of the things that citizenship demands. One thing to make notice. Be sure that the success of gathering taxes by the government. Bottom line, all these numbers, they seem to that we are looking at the government of 2.5 points of additional taxes. That's not what the main difference is in Mexico. The difference is in municipal governments. If we put all this load on the federal government, then all this is way too ambitious. I leave it over there, so then we leave it for the Q&A session. Thank you very much. Finally, we are going to hear from Mr. Santiago Levy. Good afternoon to everybody. First, thank you very much, John, for your hospitality. It is a pleasure to be here in Colombia. And it's a double pleasure to have with Jorge, Hector, and Jesus to share this debate with all these issues that we are so committed to the country. I want to make sure that all my comments are personal, my comments, and it's not a part of the IDB. I just express my opinion because it's what I am concerned with. I would like to point out that the main problem in the economy in Mexico is the social problem. And if we do not understand that the two of them are the same problem, and we speak about the social problem on one hand and the economic problem on the other one, we're making a mistake. The principal problem is that the country grows very slowly and creates very few jobs, and the jobs have been stagnant, and we don't have a social security cover, that the country is stagnant. I want to make sure that this problem is different to the problem of the crisis. This problem is much more, it's older, and it's almost 3 decades old. And it's important to understand why this is happening with our country. It is not because the Mexicans will work very little. If you see the hours that the Mexican work and the participation of the workforce, the effort that they make from Monday to Friday, that they go to work, they work very hard. It's not any difference than how often it works with other countries. We do save less than in other South American countries, but our savings are not that low. The main reason that the country is stagnant and the real salaries are stagnant is because the politics is stagnant. And if we cannot increase the productivity, we are not going to be able to compete with Asia, with other countries in the world, and we are going to still keep on being stagnant as we have done it for the last 30 years. Hector has said it at the beginning of this debate that we want to be a country with future, that we look in the future. Why the stagnation in the productivity? This has many reasons, but this one is the one that I want to point out, the informality. The informality is a big problem that we have, and it's underestimated. 60% of the workers in Mexico, more than 50%, have like an informal job. One job here, one job there. Today they are self-employed. Tomorrow they're like working in a small company. Tomorrow they are being hired by in an illegal way. 6 out of 10 are being hired in this way, and most of these companies are not being registered in the formal way. All these companies are illegal. and the combination of more of the 50% of the population and more of the 50% of these companies, they're also illegal, drive to the stagnation of the country. Why? Because the small companies, you don't do a lot of technological innovation. You don't have any economies of scale. There's not too much dynamics. And that is why the real wages are stagnant. The person who cleans the windshields today in Mexico tomorrow has the same productivity, the day after has the same productivity, and in 5 years has the same productivity. They're not increasing their productivity. And this increases in a great illegality. Because most of the companies, they spend their time to hiding from the IRS and not to training their employers or in being innovative in technology. This illegality has a major problem for Mexico and has the government in one rock spot. The country will not be able to build a future. Imagine that you see a great amount of workers that they don't have any social benefits, no pension, no health care, no protection against any dangers, no social security. The state, against this situation, says, I have to provide some social benefits, and I'm going to give them through some programs that I will be financing through the taxpayers' money. But at the same time, these employees that are being hired the formal way, are paying through this type of programs because they are being subscribed with the IRS. The problem with Mexico is that the state says to the governor, to the workers, if you are informal, I'll give you a health care solution. But if you get yourself a legal job, I'll take that health care benefit away, and you will have to pay for one. But if you are formal, you will have to save for your pension. And to the companies, they said, if you are a formal company and you hire somebody legally, you will have to pay for him. But if you're illegal and you hire somebody, we are going to praise you, because we are going to give those illegal workers the benefits that you're not paying for. And this dilemma is a very difficult one, because the government has to give those benefits, those social benefits that the population needs, and work their redistribution of resources. What happens at the bottom, at the end, is that they do more of illegal economy. With this data, in 2007, 2008, 2% of the GDP would go to subsidize these social problems, to break with illegality and to innovate those low productivity jobs. And less than 2% of the GDP will go to those legal jobs. And we have come into this vicious circle. As these companies are very small, the real wages, they get stagnant. And this requires a major redistribution of the resources from the government. And this motivates more the informal jobs. 90% of the companies in Mexico has less than 5 workers. These are small companies, very, very small companies. And these are the ones that the census capture. Another important data. The urban sides of the country, almost 50% of the workers are not even in a permanent address. They're in the street, living, selling gum, doing shoe shine. Why a worker of 25 years old that knows how to read and write, that knows how to count, that he can make changes, is working in the street and it's not working in a company being more productive? What is the problem here? The thesis here is that the incentive that is motivated by the best intentions of the state to give all the social benefits, but that's good in theory, but in the practice has been counterproductive. And this is the cause of the tightening of the taxpayer taxes, the base tax. And most of these workers receive social benefits without having to pay for them. If Mexico is not able to get over this problem, the country will not be able to get a future. And this problem is not resolved by spending more. Yes, you have to spend more, but before you do that, you have to understand the main problem between productivity and the social benefits, and make the changes in the judicial and institutional side so these changes can take place. What I propose is to resolve these two problems at the same time. And at the same time, if we solve them at the same time, you solve the two of them or you don't solve any. And the proposal is to extend all the workers in Mexico social benefits. This proposal is a social law benefit, a social law for or social benefit for Social Security, for pension. We can also say low, high, if they're enough or not enough, but not all the workers legally employed today. But if not, it's workers that the law, it's a right that the workers have for men, women, poor, wealthy, it doesn't matter. Also, simultaneously, this proposal, what I want to do is to finance this proposal with taxes through the consumption and not, as it's done today, indirectly, that the wages of the companies, we have so many companies, so small, that they take a lot of time trying to evade or avoid the IRS, and people working in the streets trying to sell whatever it is, and that those that they do pay taxes, which is a very small amount, has to subsidize the social benefits of those that are not making any type of contributions. I propose that everybody pay taxes according to their amount of money that they make, so nobody has any purchasing power, loses any purchasing power. Also, the companies would generate more jobs with a better quality, with more purchasing power, so we can compete. With no more productivity, the country will not be able to go against the poverty. This program will not be the answer to the poverty in the country. This program has to be complemented with productivity jobs, with higher paying jobs. And what we don't want is an amount of workers that they're always on poverty plans all the time. The objective is for the poverty to disappear. If the poverty maintains, I suppose we have maintained it. If we want to erase the poverty, we need to have jobs much more productive. Because that guy that's 25 years old, that with fourth year of primary knows how to read and write and crosses a river and works in the United States and becomes 1 out of 10, has a productivity 6 or 7 times higher. We need a fiscal reform that is not done at the same time with the social reform. It will be a big mistake. Increase the taxes to increase the illegal hiring would be a big mistake. What the country needs is a big reform in the fiscal and social side at the same time, and make the platform for a better future. Thank you.
The book is called A Future for Mexico. The authors are Hector Aguilar Camin and Jorge Castaneda. In a sense, it's a platform, political platform that looks for political candidates. And the first stage in this search is the public discussion of everything that's found in it on its pages. And I would like to congratulate the authors and the commentarists here present, and thank you, the audience, for your presence. And now we're going to finish this part of this panel, which is issued live to a public in Mexico to pass on to start the discussion about what we've heard. 2 announcements. The first one, the book is on sale on a table here. If you would like to buy one just after, it's cheap, very, very cheap. Second, we have here tonight, Ángeles Mastreta, the novelist of the first Primera Mexico, which is similarly the wife of Aguilar Camin, and due to her presence, we have the advantage of having her film of her first novel, Arráncame la Vida, at NYU tomorrow at 5 p.m. for those who would like to see it. And after the film at NYU, there will be a discussion with Ángeles. Now I'm going to give the floor to Executive Director of the SIPA, School of, who will carry out the question and answer session on what we've just listened to. If you would like to make a comment or a question, please make it brief and make a line behind. Just what I would like before, I would like to thank you, the 2 authors, distinguished authors. It's very an honor for us to have you here, and it's amazing to reflect upon the problems of Mexico and Latin America, and how they're in common here in the United States, even the U.S. and the rest of Latin America, especially. I would like this to be a space to reflect and create a dream, to create a space dedicated to, in Colombia, and the Institute of Latin American Studies, to reflect about Mexico and the great proposals presented in a simple form. So key. I would like to thank you very much. I have my own questions, but I would like to give the floor to. Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a quick question. Jorge, Hector, the CLE for Mexico, that the 3 parties. If the key that they have for the changes aren't going to happen, how can the society impulse and motivate the changes? Individual and dependent. It's a complicated situation. In Santiago, over the informality, I would like to add about corruption. I understand the business environment, and as far as the unions, the relationship, it's impossible to do business in Mexico. I don't know if you'd like to comment about this. Well, we have a lot of confidence in the politicians and in the Mexican society with respect to this situation. We've had a very good experience with Jorge and I to have a lot of response outside of the academic sphere and regarding the proposal. What's happened is we've gone to many cities in Mexico to speaking about this in universities, with the local press and the business community of the cities, and even with the politicians themselves who approach us to speak about our impression expressed today from a different angle is that it's a moment specifically opportune to propose change on a grand scale, which are placed in this book, and those referred to by Jesus and Santiago. Why? Because the public money is arriving to a critical crossroads. There's a lack of finance, a progressive lack of financing, extraordinarily fast in the public treasury. There's a growing consciousness among the players, of absolute dependency on the politicians that have, with respect to this treasury, in decline. There's also a public impression, which is very important, towards the politicians, on the part of the media, the public opinion of the society, Mexican society, to the point where the deputies and senators in all of the surveys have a level of credibility which is lower to the police officers. This, one can think that one is cynical, that's not going to have consequences, but aside from the professionalism which required by the politics, the truth is that nobody likes this situation. Now, we think that they have the experience, the different parties have the experience. This system in which they are in isn't working. For example, a brilliant technocrat like Cedillo, a great communicator, a populist who was Fox, and a president with a lot of parliamentary experience like Calderon have tripped over the same stone, which is the opposition to bloc. And Jorge has formulated that very specifically. In 1995, Cedillo proposes a reform for the electric in 1998, the electric sector. Who blocked it? The leader of the opposition party in the Congress opposed it. Who is the leader of the national party in this moment in Congress? Felipe Calderon. Now, Felipe Calderon is the president that needs the reforms, and the PRI, fundamentally, is the party which gave them. We think that it's obvious, even for politicians who are involved in this situation, that it's been increasing, this problem, and it can't keep going down the same road, because the whole world starts to lose what is gained. And this is our expectation, that in the midst of it all, an opportunity, there's a clarity, a vision, and a clarity in the path for all of the political forces, which hopefully will coincide with what is proposed here. But even if it doesn't, at least that it has in effect that these political forces which are manifested declare their commitments and be responsible for their decisions, because otherwise it's a very burdensome, annoying, stale situation in Mexico, because nobody is responsible. The president it proposes an initiative to Congress. The Congress, half of it accepts it, half of it rejects it. It becomes a camel. After a political force says that the responsibility out of this deformity is of the other political party, the government celebrates the reform, the necessary and possible reform. The political forces don't understand each other. And a little time after, we're speaking about the necessity of another reform. And who's responsible? Nobody knows. Who pays for this deformation It's not clear. And this lack of responsibility and clarity is very damaging.
A little summary here about corruption. This subject has its own dynamics. At the end, it has something to do with the citizenship and the state. And the citizen doesn't receive what he is entitled to from the state. This is due to part of the future for Mexico has to do with the reconstruction between the relationship between citizen and state, that the citizen feels that the state gives them and the citizen values what the state gives them. So they start to have some shameful regarding the corruption, that corruption has always existed, but the levels can always be lower. And that is due because the citizens see a state in a different way. We are going to go with the second question. Thank you very much. My name is Juan Carlos Quiroz. I would like to ask you a question that has to do with the proposal, with Dr. Levy's proposal regarding the reform that tries economy and social reform hand in hand. It sounds like a great idea, but basically is try to buy with economic rights fiscal reform. But this brings me to the general question that the proposal is done by the author's proposal. Who's going to guarantee this right that will be implemented, and how this will be implemented? Because this is one more thing for the state, that the state already has problems to give results. And this brings me to the second question, that Mr. Reyes-Heroles, it is necessary that there are more options for the citizens. And this is what I find very little in the proposal. You speak a lot about rights, but you don't mention too much the freedom. It is very easy, as you know, in Mexico, to create new rights. But it is necessary that these rights to be implemented. Why is it so difficult to create an agenda that is based on the options for the citizens and in freedom of the citizens, even if these freedoms are due to reduce the power of the state? Very good question. To whom? To Santiago? You did perceive it very well. I am looking for a fiscal reform through the social reform, but I'm not only looking for a fiscal reform. I'm also looking for a productivity reform, that the real salaries will be higher and that the company is more competitive. What is going to guarantee that? The key here is that what I had been emphasizing is that a fiscal reform with a lot of unsatisfied needs and the state has to have more resources, that would be a big mistake. To spend more of what we're already spending, we already were spending, it's a very big mistake. What we need to do is part of to legislate that income, the source of income and where that income is going. So the guarantee will be placed there. I'm not trying to say that to put a tax just to put the name of a tax, but what I'm talking about is talking about taxes and spending together. Then we can say what is the federal responsibility, the state responsibility. But what the key is here is that the Congress doesn't have to say to the citizens, I'm going to increase your taxes, you trust me, and I'm going to be a very good resource manager. I'm going to increase your taxes, and that money is going to be to create better jobs and to make sure that everybody has a pension, health insurance, And these are the specific articles that is going to happen. Santiago, let me ask you, with your experience with Latin America, how much different is Mexico in the differs from other countries when it comes to social securities and benefits, or is it very similar? I think that the informal problem is something typical from South America. But Mexico, maybe because it's a good tradition that comes from the Constitution, that state that is supposed to divide the resources has created this parallel benefit for the informals many years ago. That's why Mexico is a little bit more advanced than in the rest of Latin America. But Colombia is not that right behind. This problem is a problem in all the region. Your comments, Jesus. Let's go a little bit more in depth of what Santiago has said. What I think is that it has not been dedicated enough time to explain that a real transformation when it comes to healthcare in our country or even education requires transformation, very important, of the offer of this type of services. Generally, you don't speak about this type of subjects because it's making a confrontation with the unions that offer this type of services. But the basic idea, in the United States, which is a very common idea, is that there's an offer side that allows the family or the person at what hospital or what doctor on which way he is going to have the care, that it is a main issue for the next step in Mexico. The same thing happens with education. Here, the extreme is that families go from one county to another county so the children can go to the school that their parents want. Well, the states in Mexico still the children go, and particularly at what room the children go for the vast majority of the Mexicans. So the problem here, or what we need to have keep in mind, is the discussion of that transformation of the system of offer, and that would cause the ruffling in very important unions that is based in the monopoly construction that are under Castaneda and Aguilar. A very short question for Mr. Castaneda. What has to happen between the drug war and Mr. Calderon so all these reforms are viable, because the organized crime lately has been the main topic in the politicians' agendas? That is a very good question, but it's not exactly the question why we have been asked to come over here. I'm going to say that Hector and I, we make 3 proposals regarding security that we think are very important as far as the uniform police, and to try to substitute the 2,000 municipal policemen with 32 state police. It is not an enough step, but a good one to go. Also to create an interior minister with less politics as possible, so this police can be concentrated there, and the rest of the security can be concentrated from there. We don't have any dreams that the interior minister would not be absolutely out of politics, but at least as minimum as possible with politics. We also talk about the fight with hand in hand with the United States about the having certain drugs being free of trade. Now, what I think that I said it, Hector, that the Secretary Fernandez Gomez Mont, that according to the deputies of the PRI that started to go back to session, that after what happened in Juarez City, those horrible and terrible incidents, we need to think about the reform, about the security law before talking about any reform in the politics side. There are reforms in the Chamber of Deputies and Senators that they are all about security, energetic reforms. I don't understand why they cannot speak of two things at the same side. I don't understand why they cannot eat a taco and work at the same time. I don't see where the difficulty is. There is no reason why to keep on postponing this while we keep on winning the war against the drug trafficking. We can have very different opinions, but in all these cases is that it's not going to be won tomorrow, is to wait to keep on postponing a lot of reforms that are fundamentally nowadays, and that also this could help the other one.
I recognize Jorge Antonio Campo. I have two questions with esta observation. In this topic of recognize the destiny of being next to this great neighbor where we are now, it appears to be a very logical question. But where is the role of Mexico as the leader of Latin America? It's not the. It doesn't identify. It doesn't have an identity of a developing country, which allows it, including like in Brazil, to have a leadership be both Latin America and developing world. And so, where does the role of Mexico fall as a leader in this sense? Because it was always traditionally in this respect. And the second question, it has to do with the observations of Santiago in the international fiscal comparisons, Latin America, Mexico included, and the OECD, the great difference between the individual salary and the contributions to the society. So, let's say my question is, how can one have a tax structure or a contribution towards the state without having contributions to Social Security? The proposal of Santiago goes in the sense of eliminating the contributions that the state guarantees is the general tax, one of the as general universal benefits. Where is this pillar of the Social Security? That's one of the most fundamental pillars of the social structure of the OECD. Thank you very much. Quickly, I think that it's the great pride for Mexico having had positions in the vanguard in international issues in Latin America, but it's that regarding leadership is a total invention. Overall, especially when there's the best moments in diplomacy of Mexico, represented by the ambassador, is when we were alone. Not only we were only leaders, we were totally alone. 54 in the conference of Caracas about the Guatemala, obviously without breaking off ties with Cuba in 61, 62, and Punta del Este, and then having been not just with breaking ties with Pinochet in 73, but also in having detained the thought of the systematic refugees and Chilean exiles only in the statement on El Salvador. We had to go to get the French people because nobody in Latin America wanted to side with us. We didn't, if we hadn't found the French-speaking people, this theory that Mexico was never a leader in Latin America. We had positions which were shared with the dictator, which went against the dictatorships, but we never followed, we were never followed, and perhaps with a small exception, but that was when we were a lot, and we weren't one or two, we were many. So it seems that we have to be realistic. Brazil has power in Latin America due to its diversification in commerce, to have 6 countries bordering it, to have a diversification in its investments, its exports, everything. Mexico does not have that possibility. But it's not that we are losing it. We lost it now. We lost it 100 years ago. Mexico concentrates everything. John mentioned the book on the Porfirio trains weren't even built for the south, for the north, for the east, the west, only for the north, or there down, here down, Mexico up. I think that yes, it's something effectively we must, but I don't know if resign ourselves, or to regret, but we have to see things as they are. And where are we? Where have we been in the last 30 years? And where is it convenient for us to be? And that's going to imply decisions, very difficult decisions in Mexico. And that's what Hector and I are proposing, that people decide, that think, deliberate. I hope that there is a candidate for presidency in 2012 that would say openly, I want to destroy the free trade with the United States. I want to diversify the Mexican imports, for example. Starting with the 2012, I want to place a tariff to all of the corn imported from the United States, and I don't want to subsidize any type of the imports of corn from Brazil, because I prefer that we're partners or dependents on Brazilian corn rather than the U.S. And that's what I propose to you as Mexicans. Vote for me or not. I want to see, one, who dares to say it, and two, who would vote for him? Who in Mexico would be available to pay more for corn in Brazil because it's not gringo, it's not American? If there's one here, please raise your hand, because in Mexico, they're not there. And the second half of the question, I think, corresponds to Jesus or Santiago. I think it's very good, Jose Antonio. My proposal is to duplicate the contributions to Social Security. 3 to 6% of the GDP, but we can debate it. The most important point is that if we want to continue with the same scheme in where the contribution is associated with the salaried work scheme, it's a right to receive a salary, because the contribution to Social Security is the right of a worker, including employees, rural workers, domestic workers, all workers. And so in what I'm saying is that instead of collecting Social Security at the door of the company, like in November, we would charge the benefits at the door of the store with a huge difference. All pass through the store, but half of Mexico doesn't go through the factory. Who says that the politicians are slaves of a politician? We're slaves of dead politician. Bismarck said that that's how Social Security resigns. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have a question for Santiago. It's regarding the reform to the sustainability. I don't see where we're regarding it, at least in the context of Mexico, with respect to Latin America, that you know better. Reforms to sustainability development in 2009 reports that 65% of the population in Latin America is concentrated in urban areas. I don't see, except in the case of other cities, that's developing policies that go linked to the topic of the productivity. For example, cities with an infrastructure can achieve, specifically a question of viability to achieve metropolitan. We are ready. Do you refer to sustainability of the environment, and obviously a better infrastructure, especially because the majority of the population in Latin America are located in urban areas. I don't know if I'm the best person to comment on that. Not even in the essay or the proposal talks about the environmental topic, not because it's not important, but clearly a democratic society talked about by Jorge is more related to topics proposed in a more systematic area. Although it doesn't mean it's not an important topic. I don't know if anybody else would like to comment on. I don't want to take away importance, but I don't feel ready or prepared to comment on that. I think that effectively our content it's something that must be proposed in a version, in a subsequent version. Do you have it here? Because it's a topic every day more important. A country has a situation very, very regrettable regarding land. I think it's doing some efforts to. There's a multiplication of water treatment plants and drinkable water plants, and at least it's beginning. If we're going to reflect in a few years on this, about the contamination of water, there are many other topics that I don't really have an evaluation on the topic. Thank you very much.
It is very important, this subject, but this is implicit in the essay. This essay is thought with an urban Mexico in mind. This is thought after the rural Mexico. The rural Mexico represents in this moment less than 4% of the GDP in Mexico. The majority of the GDP, though 4%, is how the majority of the agriculture is in the country. The change in society that we are talking about, the value of the industries in Mexico, in very recent data that was gathered, is around 5% above the GDP. The cultural assets that produces Mexico value is worth more than what the rural world produces. This is an essay that has been thought with an urban Mexico, but you are still right. That is a central subject that we have not talked about it because we did not have something specific that we had to bring to the table. Or at the end, we have taken matter of this subject and other subjects that we have spoken here. This essay has been thought about for different points. We talked about the beginning and the end of the modernization that has been stated here, the validity of the state, the sustainability of development, the generalization of the instruments of the knowledgeable society, and the transparency of the public accounts. No reform has been based on illegality, destruction of the surroundings. Before we go to the next questions, I would like to thank the presence of Rubén Beltrán, that is one of the ambassadors, and Alder Munoz from the ambassador of Chile in the United Nations. Now we can go to this question. My name is Alejandro Cardona. I'm also in SIPA, and I have a question and a precision that I think it's worth mentioning. The question is regarding the public expenditure. It's a very important engine for the development of our country and any other. We are way below another OECD countries in Latin America. But besides increasing the public expenditure, the public expenditure has been 3 billion pesos and has been increasing year over year. And moreover, the public expenditure has also been talked about the quality of that expenditure, because in education we have more than 100 million pesos that we have go to school, but it's lost with the unions. So there should be some type of quality controls. I don't know if there's some type of a way to mention those type of mechanisms. The proposal of President Cedillo about the energy reform, it was the privatization of the Energetic Commission, and it was rejected by unanimity of a society that was blocked in our country. And that proposal of Mr. Calderon was to reform the Mexican oil companies, was only to participate in the private sector. It is important that there was blockage done through the two political parties in the energy, and the other one was only a private participation in the Pemex company. I think that the question is relevant. Thank you so much, Alejandro, for your comment and your question. You're absolutely right. When we discuss the insufficiency, the difference between expenditure, it has to be done in a very knowledgeable way, in the way that that expenditure is done. What I think it's very personal is that in the last years, or even decades, the argument that has been inefficient usage of the expenditure and the corruption, it's absolutely obvious. That gathers you the conclusion that first you need to solve that problem, and then you have to talk about the insufficient expenditure. And I don't think that has been used to block the discussion on the subject. To be able to unblock this has to be done simultaneously on both sides. We have very examples that they're totally opposite one to the other one. The case of healthcare has been increasing the expenditure in the last years, first because of an increment of public infrastructure that is not justified, that they are not necessary, but also due to another type of initiatives, the resources assigned to opportunities, that is to say, original opportunities. A bigger program with more channels to spend has increased substantially. Also has increased the expenditure to go towards healthcare. The way of doing it has the implications that Santiago Levy has mentioned. The Secretary Frank, to be able to increase the resources to health insurance, so little by little has been able to increase the resources to health insurance, which has been a very good strategic move. Also, there has been other issues that have been increasing the public expenditure. Has it done right or wrong? Well, I think that it was kind of like so-so. I don't think that we can say that the public expenditure is like kind of like a Satan. When you pay a nurse or you pay a teacher, that is public expenditure. So let's not make the public expenditure like Satan, We want to have better social benefits, but we don't want to keep on spending. That makes kind of like no sense. So that kind of like we have to analyze in a complex what do we want to know to have regarding pensions. We have liabilities that have not been funded. Some resources have been devoted to them to the problem of the pensions. The beginning of Calderon's presidency, it was resolved the East issue, which was also brought some of the Social Security issue and the public account. Also, you see those expenses. So you have to see in education we spend more than any OECD country. But it shows that we have a major disaster in the educational system in Mexico, inclusive the private sector, not only the public sector, but the university, the private universities and the private schools has not given the results we had expected. I have not had the chance to participate in the electric reform. I was already in Washington in 1987. It was energetic, and the energetic reform was privatization reform. It did not happen because the terms and conditions that was implied. The reforms of 92 and 95 and the gas, all that had no problems in the reforms, and all that get developed. But this one, yes, did have problems. The reform with Pemex of Mexican soils had a reform that did not have a privatization issue. It was just a way for making the company stronger, and it was way too short of what originally was thought of, because at the beginning we accepted there was not a constitutional reform because of what reason was. Maybe it was a political reason, but without a constitutional reform, it's not enough to bring around the reform that Pemex needs, which is to be able to partner with whomever they want, for whatever amount of money they want, with whomever they want. And not that they are like charged or marked, that they only bring more rigidity, that it's very impossible to operate. One was a privatization reform, and the other one was not pretend to be one.
We're getting to the end of our chat, and the last three people are going to be have very short questions, and they'll be together so you can all answer them together. The last brief question, which is a little general, about the democratic tide. Do you believe that the young democracy in Mexico can reach citizens? The article talks about the architect in productivity and all that, but without a modern democracy like America, how can we see that the powers like the Supreme Court, its desire to influence on the elections? Do you believe that the Mexican democracy can reach the parties can reach the citizens? Are they willing to fight, or are they going to continue a political fight? Thanks for the first question. The second question, implementation of reforms, because Hector mentioned the society to motivate the politicians, but I think that it's going to reach a certain point, and it has to also reach unions and other monopolies, power, and who are also members of the unions, who could also weaken it. Thank you for the second question. And the last one, my question is on the reform to political reform. How can you reconcile that even though the Mexican electorate has the possible, if it wants to elect a majority in the Congress or for president, no, it hasn't done it. How do you confide in this message to the electorate to reconcile it to the extent to reinforce in the second round this mechanism? How do you interpret this message, even though it's been able to do, it hasn't done? Thank you to those who have made questions and to those who have asked before. Now let's listen to the answers. Jorge or Hector, whoever, would you like to express about the first and the last? I think there are many things that Mexico can do to reach the citizens, to the power, or to reach the political system that are more or less things that are well known in other countries, and that there are no reason why they can't function. They might not function perfectly or have all the desirable characteristics. I'm just going to give two examples. In the chamber, the law on collective action suits in Mexico, it was in the chamber, and then they removed it. Class action lawsuits in the Senate. They were in the Senate, and now it's stalled in the deputy chamber. Something so simple as class action suits in Mexico, we have not been able to achieve. There's in Colombia, Brazil, Chile, in all of Latin America, and let's not even talk about the United States or Canada. There's no form. The only thing that we have is the fiscal of or the general attorney on consumerism that doesn't sue anybody, even if we had one. So it's a very typical example of approaching the citizenship. It's very simple, and the same thing is certain about the independent famous candidates. They're not. They don't solve everybody's problems. They're not magicians. But when I hear about people in Mexico, intelligent, and they say they're also dangerous, and it doesn't matter. And that's why I'm so perplexed, because I don't know which of the two they are. And I also talk about the case in Chile. Patonavia commented on this, the ambassador. I understand that the surveys, exit surveys of the voters, omenamistas, were divided 60 Frey, 20 Piñera, and 20 abstain, which says that with a little bit more of Frey votes of this universe, the concertation would have won. In light of the Marco isn't anything to convince his voters, I don't know if you know who he is or not, to vote for Frey. If he had made, or a little bit, it's nothing impossible that the 2 or 3 points that they lost, they could have won. I ask myself, they didn't have it. The independent candidates didn't have any impact in Chile. It can be a bad impact, or a bad impact according to the voters of the concertation. But I don't think that the voters saw it badly of Sebastián Piñera. I think that it's a topic. I think we have two very concrete elements. What the last question referred to, this electorate systems are based on induce the type of political system that they want, not the reverse. It's been, as Cordova said in his essay and said before, because we all know that you can manipulate or agentize the electorate to achieve whatever result that you want. there's electorate systems that systematically get majorities, and others that have never resulted in majorities. The important thing is to decide, as a society, as a country, what do we want, and then transfer that to the electorate system to be more aware of that objective, not the reverse. I don't know really. I can't say if Mexico really does want a majority. For example, practically all the states of the republic are one single party. The country is a single party, really, and all those states are very single party, and so all states there's a majority, both on a legislation level and executive level. Maybe, but what's important is that's first to know what the country wants. It's very difficult to know. What's important to know is what does the society want, and to propose those objectives to us, and then make the electorate and the citizen produce that. I understand that there can be other points of view, but for me, thank you very much. Hector, well, Santiago said it very well. In the economic environment proposed in the small essay, the change of emphasis is a radical change, not to talk about how to fight against poverty, which is an obsession of the Mexican politics and its history, but it's like it has taken a path very contrary to the deep idea of fighting poverty, and to begin thinking about how to create richness, which are very different things. The same for the political reform. We're proposing a change of emphasis that is turning out to be a big change. The reform designed to design system so that there is clear majority in the Congress. We come from a design, and therefore the things are like this. It's not because Mexicans want this, but there's a design in the architecture in 96, which came in at a time a country hiding from the abusive means, never legitimized by other means, and there was agreement of the political forces at that time that to design something so nobody could have a majority again in the Congress, under the supposition that if nobody had the majority in the Congress, the political actors would be obligated to agree. Well, the first question worked. Nobody has the majority in Congress. It's been decreed in the Constitution where it says that nobody can have an overrepresentation of over 8 points. That says that the force that could have the majority in the Congress, 50+1, would have to obtain 43% of the places in the election. This, in a party system in Mexico, is impossible. What we've seen is all to the contrary. Lower percentages every day obtained in the elections, federal elections. It worked that nobody has the majority, but from 96, the first victim of this system was Cedillo. From this, the parties have not agreed. They have they block each other. The idea is that the formula doesn't work. It's not the political culture. What doesn't work is the engineering. We accept that the political parties, if there's no majority, they're gonna block each other upon collaborating, and that's what's happened in the last 14 years. And let's establish a system where democratically built the majorities in the Congress, and these proposals are oriented towards that. And the second round, with the legislative elections, with proposals and candidates in the second round, why should the political election carry the legislation, and a president with the faculties and capacities to have initiative in the government or in the induction of the agenda of the Congress?
With capacity of veto and capacity to be able to defend themselves and to be responsible, that brings the and capacity to initiate laws that are fundamental, that the Congress will not be able to block, to transform or to accept within an amount of period of time. This is the initiative. This is the sense of this proposal, to generate majority to change the previous agreement and to look for one that does generate. It does not any politician, serious politician that has seen very closely the legislative process and the process of decision-making from the reform of 1996 had to arrive to the conclusion that it's not the presidents or the parties, political parties, that are asking for the country to move, but it is that agreement. Any president that arrives probably will have the same situation the President Cedillo and Fox and Calderon. To all these candidates that they are in their way, and at first they should have the same idea of doing the reform right now, because all these candidates, and especially those that they think they can win, they will have to have very clear that it will be for their advantage to win if they have their home in order, if they want to win, which this means to reinforce the presidency. The biggest obstacle that is absolutely clear, that has an initiative like this one, and knows that if the PAN wins, is not going to win for much more than what he won, and that a president will be in the same condition that he is. He knows the PRI, that the candidate of the PRI has to win the presidency, is that his triumph comes with a majority in the Congress. And the less that understand this are the ones who seem to be more in line to win. This has not worked because Cedillo has been a bureaucrat, a technocrat. Fox was a fool, and Calderon is a panista and does not know how to govern. And we know how to govern and how to obtain the majorities the Brazilian way. So we don't need the biggest reforms in the law. We know how to do it. Yes, we can. That is the biggest obstacle of this reform, that the group have this idea that they know how to govern independently of the laws that are in place for the political reform. So we are going to see. With that, we are going to close the session. A very big applause.